Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. I'm your host, Nino, joined again by my co-host, Pei Chen. Pei, how's it going?
Doing great. And before we started recording already, we were kind of joking around, and I made a comment. I said, Nino, how do you look so good? What's your secret? So I think we should start with that.
Yeah, so
Go
so
right to
today
the
we're
point.
we're straight to the point. Tell me your skin routine. No, no. I think so. Today we'll just to give people a kind of oversight. We'll talk about skin health because I think that it's a very with nutrition. I think skin is one of those things that people want potentially a quick fix. People want answers, people want a simple solution, and unfortunately there is a lot of misinformation and supplements and products out there that claim to do things because keep in mind that the supplement market is not regulated by any federal body here in the United States. So I can create a product, make a claim that it could do this, and then sell it to people, such as snake oil as an example. There's certain boundaries to that. If it's harmful, of course the FDA will step in, but I just want to kind of put that as a precursor. And then from there, as because with skin, typically when skin is the first thing you see about somebody, their facial skin, their arms, their legs, you can kind of get a gauge of their age. You can see, okay, that person has really good skin. They must be in their 20s or they must be in their 30s. But oftentimes you'll find people in their 40s, 50s, and beyond who will have really healthy skin, and it's almost deceptive in a good way because you think that, oh my, they look like they're in their 40s, but then you find out they're in their 60s. So we'll talk about kind of aging gracefully, and different tools and recommendations to do at different stages in life. So let's kind of dive right in. So skin. So, but first and foremost, I'm not a dermatologist. If you have, we're talking more cosmetic skin. We're not necessarily talking about preventative skin cancers, tanning, those types of things. If you have questions, comments, concerns on your own skin, of course, always seek the advice of medical professionals.
I think we just really want, like, our mindset. We're just so curious about everything, right?
Mm,
Not just money, not just relationships, and not just friendships and whatever that we've talked about before, but overall, right? As a human being, I'm
yeah,
genuinely interested in you and how do you take care of yourself, right?
yeah,
Also, on a mental level as well. So I think that's appropriate for us to kind of touch on
yeah.
that.
Well, it's funny because I think there's this stereotype between men and women when it comes to skincare, right? If you're not familiar, there's this. I laugh because this thought came into my mind. If you ever go to like the men's section at like a Target or a Walmart and you look for face wash with men, you have these all in ones where you have like a 6-in-1. You'll have shampoo, conditioner, face wash, shaving cream, oil change, all these things all
Right,
in one
right.
bottle that you could do,
And a bathroom cleaner all in
and a
one.
bathroom cleaner all in one, and it cleans everything just the same. And now with women, you have a shampoo for every single shade of the rainbow. You have a conditioner for every shade of the rainbow. So you have all these products, right? And I'm speaking from experience here because it wasn't until I moved in with my wife that I realized that there was this whole world of cosmetics. And people would tell me, like, oh, you have good skin. And I attribute it to my nutrition and my exercise, which we'll talk about here shortly. But part of that is there is skin, there are routines, there are proven like medical things that you can do to help with preventing aging, preventing wrinkles. And we're talking on a non-procedural basis. I'm not talking about Botox. I'm just talking simply about skin health. I think with the face, one of the common sense things that I learned, which should be common sense, is anytime you sweat, wash your face. Right. So my wife would always, and she still does to this day, she'll get on me for when I'm done, when I get back from the gym. Like I might eat before I shower, and she's like, "Hey, make sure you wash your face." And I notice it. If I don't, and I still have, because I go to the sauna, I'll have sweat that I'll start breaking out around certain areas because that's where I'm sweating the most. So step number one, as with all personal hygiene, wash your hands, wash your face. And then from there, I think there are other like toners that I've used, face masks, different things. I'm very open about this stuff because to me, I like we talked about in previous episodes, there's optimizing, right? There's just optimizing every little thing. Like I go to the dentist, and the dentist is like, your teeth look great, but if you want to take it to that next level, get this device. And I'm like, I'll
Mm.
get that and then another one, just because I want to be great at everything. So that's something, there's different products that I've tried out, like just for my face, skin creams, just moisturizers, right? Once you wash your face, you can kind of clean it up and then put some moisturizer to protect it and keep it all in. And that's something that I noticed, and I'm curious, I want to kind of transfer this back to you. When going to Japan for the first time, something that I've noticed is the Asian cultures, their skin is fantastic. I mean, when I look at just the Asian people between the ages of 20 and 100, it's like you can't tell the difference, because they're like, I'll see 70, 80 year olds that are just looking so fantastic. And seeing it in Japan, they don't have these fancy products at all. Like they have their, maybe their family stuff that they've used in the past, but it's rare that you see them taking all these pharmaceutical chemicals that they're putting on their face. So I'm curious, from your experience, obviously being from an Asian background, what do you feel is the reason for that?
I think that culture is starting to change, right? Because like you went to Japan, you haven't gone to Korea, where Korea is all about that cosmetic, you
Oh,
know,
really? Okay.
the industry. They have like a whole street. I haven't been personally, but I've seen TikToks and videos where they have like entire street that's dedicated to selling cosmetics, like
Really?
skincare cosmetics. We
Yeah.
gotta make a trip just to go out there and check it out.
Let's do a podcast out there for sure.
I'm gonna go with an empty suitcase and come back with a full suitcase, that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I think culturally, I think historically, it has like the Asian culture cares a lot about diet first. Like
Right.
what you eat, is really important. The herbal, there's a lot of herbal, medicinal, internal healing type culture there. Like
Hmm.
when you're sick, they don't want to. The typical thing is not to go to the hospital
Hmm.
first, right? They want to know, like, they want to go and see if there's something that's natural that can heal me
Right.
first, right?
Right.
So they like to treat the disease and not the symptom, and that's the big
Mm.
big difference
Mm.
between Western medicine and Eastern medicine, right? The
Yeah.
in the U.S., if I have a cough, the minute I have that, I'm gonna take something to suppress the cough.
Right.
I'm not gonna think about like why am I coughing, right?
Yep.
Did I eat too greasy food last night? Did I, what happened?
Is there
Um,
inflammation? Yep.
exactly, right. So that is the start, and then while they do take care of, they obviously don't eat like the portions that we do eat here.
Sure.
So like that whole weight management and all that kind of stuff helps with anti-aging, as we are starting to find out about like inflammation and all that kind of stuff. So
Mm.
like, and I think just over in Asia, that cleanliness you talk about is
Yep.
huge.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you won't find people wearing makeup to go to sleep. Like that routine, even if
Hmm.
they come, even like if they come home from like a really late evening and whatnot,
Yeah.
you know, it's you gotta remove all your makeup, cleanse, and like even I still remember growing up, super cold. We don't have heat, like I grew up in Taiwan, so it's like a tropical island. So what
Hmm.
do you need heat for? You're cold for like one day out of the year. Um, but on those cold days, and it does drop to like freezing degrees, right? And there's no heat, so your inside temperature, outside temperature is the same.
Sure.
Even on those cold days, my mom, when we were growing up, she still, even if we don't wash our hair and whatnot, she would still be like, "You have to still wash your face,
Hmm.
your feet and everything, because that's just the routine that you can't break."
Yep.
And so it's just kind of start from young that it's different. I think like Asian culture, we shower at night.
Yep.
We don't, right? So it's just like it was a big adjustment coming here.
No, I think that that's so well put, because we're talking about tactical things. I again, this just is the basis of our show. If you're tuning in and you're expecting us to say take this product and your skin is going to look healthy for the next 50 years, that's not what we're going to do. Right? We're talking about behavioral things, fitness and finance that we can do to enhance our quality of life. And skincare, I think, is so important because you can garner a lot of confidence by the way you look. If you feel a certain way, like I know like from experience, if I see my face breaking out a little bit, it makes me a little bit insecure
Mhm.
naturally. So I try to do what I can, and I've learned, and learning from you, learning from different people about what, okay, I look at cultures, what cultures have the best skin. Okay, the Asian cultures have the best skin. I have friends, my wife will have friends that come from the Asian background, I learned what they do, right? The whole wearing masks, wearing gloves, that was a thing prior to the pandemic. Before that, that's just something you see in the
Oh yeah,
culture.
avoiding the
They're
sun is big.
avoiding the sun every time in Japan. So Japan rains a lot, but so it's rains or it doesn't. But they'll people will always have umbrellas, and
Mhm.
they're because they're limiting the exposure to the rain, but also to the sun. They're covering their face, and there is a something to be said about that because skin exposure naturally, if you don't have a lot of melanin, if you're not as dark, skin exposure could lead to a prevalence of
Premature,
damage
yeah,
to your
yeah.
skin. So it's a preventative thing. And they take these measures, wearing gloves, wearing a mask, having an umbrella to limit sun exposure, but limit toxins that are coming into their system, which if you're limiting the toxins that come in, you're limiting the amount that your body has to filter through. So in essence, it makes your liver, your kidneys a little bit stronger because it's easier to clean whatever toxins do come in. So I think step one is limiting sun exposure. If you're exposed to the sun, wearing sunscreen. There's mineral based and chemical based sunscreens. I won't go into that too much right now. I know there is some concerns that people have expressed about wearing chemical sunscreens and how that damage could actually damage the skin if you wear it for too long. If you're interested in learning more about different sunscreens, there's an episode that came out. So we're recording this in July of 2024. There's an episode that came out on the Huberman Lab podcast back in early July 2024, where he breaks this down very, very well about skin health and different sunscreens to use. So if you're interested in that, I definitely encourage you to go reference that, and I'll put the episode in the show notes so you can reference. But so kind of minimizing your exposure to the sun, wearing sunscreen. Another big thing with skin is hydration, and people don't necessarily know this, but making sure you're drinking a lot of water throughout the day. If you ever see somebody like you, what's the first thing when we see somebody that we know very well and we see them frequently and they look sick? What does that mean when we say, "Hey, do you look sick?" Their
Mhm.
skin doesn't look as healthy. It doesn't look what's called plump, right? It looks
Yeah,
depleted. It looks dry. It
yeah.
doesn't look nourished, right? And so the skin is an indicator of something going on internally. It's a reflection of how your body's doing on the inside. And so if you're not properly hydrated, you won't get that plumpness to it. I'm not talking about fat. I'm talking about the skin, the elasticity,
Yeah.
what we form as plump. So making sure you're hydrated, drinking water throughout the day is huge. And then with nutrition, you mentioned it very well. When we eat certain foods that we're eating can be anti-inflammatory, can be like caffeine, for example, and alcohol will dehydrate us. And if we're not drinking enough fluids, then that will make us look what's called dry. Like it makes us look depleted and our skin doesn't look full and it doesn't look as healthy, first and foremost. And then acne, right, which is kind of the thing that when we associate with skin not being clean or skin being not as smooth, it tends to be because there tends to be acne there. And that you mentioned about inflammatory, there are certain foods like dairy products for people, things like red meat in high amounts, and especially fast food, high fat foods could definitely trigger the inflammatory response, and you'll notice it. I mean, tell me, have you had a fatty, greasy meal, and then in a few hours or the next day, you notice your skin is different? Am I right?
Oh yeah, and I don't know if this happens to other people, but I would get like a pimple, but it's not something that you can pop. It's painful.
Yeah.
And those are like for me, like in Asia or in the Chinese culture, there's hot food and cold food.
Mm-hmm.
And you can Google, what's hot food and what's cold food. Like for example, um, fried foods in general are considered hot food. They cause inflammation,
Yeah.
right? So when you eat a lot of those hot food, like my body response is like the next day, I will get
Yep.
like a random pimple and it's gonna be painful, and that tells me like, oh, you overdid
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Go back to eating a salad, right? So yeah, it's kind of funny, like the what the older culture do,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's coming back into a
Yeah.
lot of the supplements and all that stuff. And it's just
Yep.
funny because I'm like, oh
You're
my god,
so
that's
right.
what my mom told me, not to eat that because it's hot food.
I think that the science is catching up with the tradition. That's how
Mm,
I see it, is that these traditions, especially in the Asian cultures, have been around for thousands of years. And now we're just in the scientific community understanding the mechanisms behind why they're working. And that's why I loved, again, going back to my trip. I'm curious. I'm very curious about Eastern medicine in general, about treating not the symptoms but the cause, going down to the root, what's going on, and how can we be preventative. And the U.S. is in the West is going more towards preventative medicine, but they're still doing it in a westernized way. Yeah, they want to be preventative, but it's okay, how can we prevent this with the supplement? I don't know. You're missing the whole point. The whole point of going to preventative medicine is to avoid the supplement. It's more going after the lifestyle. So
Mm.
I mentioned hydration. I love the hot and cold concept. It's the same as anti-inflammatory, pro-inflammatory. So I mentioned pro-inflammatory foods. Anti-inflammatory foods will be things like you mentioned a salad. So greens are dark leafy greens, your spinach, your kale, your broccoli. These nutrients, there's especially in fruits and vegetables, you'll find things like vitamin C. And vitamin C is one of the best things to help with your skin is made up a lot of vitamin C. So it's very protective of your skin when you consume high amounts of vitamin C. I will pause here to say there's a difference between consuming vitamin C from supplements and vitamin C from foods. We don't necessarily know what the difference is, but the theory is that on an isolated vitamin C, if you're taking like a vitamin C capsule or vitamin C powder, you're just getting the vitamin C. When you eat an orange, when you eat spinach and you get the vitamin C from those foods, there's other nutrients associated with it that help the digestion and absorption. Excuse me, that help with the digestion and absorption of the vitamin C. So keep that in mind when you're consuming. It's always going to be best to use the foods.
So would it be like if this is great for us to then talk about what I kind of have been thinking on my mind for a while. Like, would it be let's say I want to get healthy now? I'm in my late 40s, about to hit 50, and I wanted to develop a new regimen, right? And I'm not opposed to eating some supplements, right, to kind of kickstart all that kind of stuff, right? So would it be helpful if I'm at a stage where I've been really bad, I broke all the rules, and now I want to go, back
Yeah.
towards being good again? And you know, I'm sure a lot of people are in my boat, right? You're not working out, you're not really, you haven't been taking care of yourself and doing all the things that should be done. Um, would it make sense to, like, okay, I'm going to start watching what I eat, implement more of the whole foods and healthy foods, um, quality meats, right? And then adding on, more exercise and more of the like, especially for my women my age, right? Weight bearing stuff.
Yep.
And then at the same time, kind of cheat a little bit with the supplements and then transition out, or like how would that package look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a question that varies by different age groups. But I'll address kind of the question of what you're mentioning, kind of in the 40s and 50s. So for people in their 40s and 50s, I'm going to talk about men and women separately. For women specifically, when it comes to supplementation, regardless of if you're been quote unquote good or bad, I don't like using those terms good and bad because it demonizes it, it shames it. I don't want people to feel like, oh my God, I'm a bad person. It's not. You're starting. It's fine. There's no good or bad way. There's always ways to improve.
Reset.
But
Let me
a reset.
want to do a reset. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. However you want to define it. But with women kind of in that age bracket, what we're looking at is the transition into menopause. And one of the biggest things that happens is the decline in bone density. And that can lead to numerous problems. That's why the biggest thing is strength training. For every age bracket I'm going to go through, strength training is the biggest one to help out strengthening bones. The second thing is to consume foods that are high in both calcium and vitamin D. So foods that will be high in calcium and vitamin D are going to be dairy products. And when I say dairy, I'm more referencing things like yogurt, like milks. So like it could be 1%, 2%, even fat-free milk, yogurts, Greek yogurt, which you'll get high amounts of protein there. Any dairy products will typically be high in calcium and vitamin D. You have a lot of fruits and vegetables, so broccoli, spinach, carrots, any bright colored fruits and vegetables are typically going to have high levels of both vitamin C and calcium. Another place to find vitamin D is in meat products, so eggs, meat, poultry. You'll find those too. If if you're considering supplementation, and this goes for any supplement, the first thing that I always suggest doing is go see your doctor and first of all, let your doctor know you want to make these lifestyle changes because they're going to want to get a baseline of what you're trying to do so they can monitor and make sure everything's going good. But get a lab panel done to check your baseline levels of your calcium, your vitamin D, your blood glucose, it's called a CBC BMP, a basic metabolic panel. Just runs you through. That's what you'll get if you go see your doctor on an annual basis. But get that, and then they'll tell you, hey, you're deficient in, let's say, vitamin D. Then they'll give you the option to supplement. And in that case, then I would answer your question by yes. It's not cheating. By no means is it cheating. You're just supplementing it, hence the term supplementing it into your diet. But if you're not deficient in any of the key nutrients, supplementing is not necessarily going to make a huge difference. It might make a small one, but you're not deficient. So there's no need to become any better. It's more, am I deficient? And if I am, partner the supplement with foods that are high in that nutrient. Then eventually, when you get your diet enough to where you're getting enough from the diet, then get off the supplement. Once you get off the supplement, you then do a retest on your labs and you see, have I brought in the supplement should only be used to bring you back to baseline. Once you're at baseline, you don't need the supplement anymore. And once you're in those healthy values, you can simply rely on the foods that you're eating. Does that make sense?
How long should those panels be? I mean, I'm sure you can work with your doctor on this, but typically,
Yeah.
like it's every 6 months or an annual review. Like, you know what I mean?
If you're maintaining and you've gotten to a healthy lifestyle, typically it's every year, and your insurance will typically cover an annual physical that will cover this. But if you're going from, again, quote unquote, bad to good, and you're making pretty drastic lifestyle changes, which we'll talk about yo-yo dieting here in a second. But if you're making pretty drastic lifestyle changes, ideally, I would say every 3 months. If you have them, and this is where having money is me one of the biggest important things to maintain your health. I personally would do it every 3 months because then 3 months is enough time for you to implement changes and assess the efficacy of those changes. So you start a new diet today or a new lifestyle change, and then in 3 months you reflect. Okay, what I did, my labs all became normal, and then from there you would do one more test 3 months later to make sure everything's kind of flowing well. Then you can maintain, and then a year later go see your doctor. But that way you'll check. Okay, this 3 months my vitamin B12 went up, but it's still deficient. All right, now I need to add these foods more in of these certain foods. Check again in 3 months. So to answer your question, if money's not an issue, or if you prioritize your health and you want to use your money to prioritize your health, I would say 3 months as you're starting to make drastic changes.
And if my health insurance company won't cover it, my hack is I'm gonna go and apply for a large life insurance policy so that they will run my numbers for free. They
That
will send a nurse to my house and take my blood because I'm afraid of needles. So I'd be like lying down in my living room, and they'll come and they'll like put on some like calming music. They'll draw my blood, weigh me. That's my physical my in between annual
yeah.
physical. That's
No,
my free physical.
that's so when I got one of my IBC policies, one of the first times that I opened them up, I actually did that. I had just got my physical in January, and then the nurse was like, oh, we're gonna do your policy, your labs in March. And I said, no, 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 give me like another 2 months. I just made some changes, and I want to make sure I time my labs correctly. I swear I did this. That's smart. If you want to, I mean, you're killing two birds
They
with
do
one
it for
stone.
free
They
anyway.
do it
So
for
I'm like,
free. You're
yeah.
getting an IBC policy, which we've talked about the value of the infinite banking concept. We're going to talk more about it with Mike Everett that we'll have on the show soon. Shout out, Mike. So we'll have different benefits from it, but yes, I think getting your labs done, and typically it's become a lot cheaper now to get them done. So if you have to pay out of pocket, you shouldn't be paying more than $100. And I know it's a decent amount of money, but it's definitely because I mentioned this in an early show, like what gets measured gets improved. How do you know you're losing weight if you don't weigh yourself?
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Or inches. Right. That's why you
Yeah.
got, even lifting weight. Like I'm not a big weightlifter, person, but my daughter is getting really into it. I mean, shout out to her. She's got the discipline to
Mhm.
actually do it, because I'm like, isn't that painful? And she'll talk about how painful it is. But yeah, like at 16 years old, she's designed her own like regimen and whatnot. And I'm just like, well, how do you know? I guess for weightlifters, your
Yeah.
measurement is a little bit different,
In
like
terms of in
like
terms of your well,
progress.
correct. Yeah. So and there's when it comes to weightlifting, there's two ways you can focus, and it all depends on what the goal is. Again, it always comes back to goal setting. But with weightlifting, there's two reasons why you lift weights. There's probably more, but there's mainly two. But there's three. Your athletic performance. So let's say you're playing a sport, basketball, football, soccer, and you're using weightlifting to complement and enhance the development of your shoulders as a basketball player. That's one. Two, and this is the most common, is aesthetics. If you're trying to shape your body aesthetically as a man, you want bigger shoulders, bigger chest, small waist. As a woman, typically lower half, nice trim upper body. Depending on what your goal is, aesthetically, you can shape that. And the third is if you're training like as an actual weight lifter, like a power lifter. And in that regards, you're strictly, if you ever want to look at the differences in athletes, look at a power lifter versus a bodybuilder versus a marathon runner or a soccer player. You'll see the differences in physique. The biggest, the most strongest guys you'll see are going to be actually pretty heavy. And I mean, like they'll have a big belly, they'll weigh a lot because they're trying to push as much weight as possible. So if the goal is strictly increasing strength, you're not going to care anything about your aesthetics. You're solely going to base your numbers off of your lifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Side note here, one of the show, I think I mentioned this to you before. There's a show that it's a Korean.
Oh, I love
Uh,
this show. We
show.
talked about this.
We're talking about the physical 100.
Oh my
It is
God. Love this show.
always shocking. Like you see, like the big guy, the one that looks super strong. You think, you assume like they're gonna win
Yeah.
the competition. Like 2 seasons in a row. I don't want to give it away. It's not who
Yeah.
you think, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
wins the competition. So
You see, and for those who don't know, Physical 100 is a show that tests all physical abilities. So it's not just strength, it's muscular endurance, it's physical endurance, it's mental toughness. So you could be the biggest, strongest guy in that facility, but if you can't run
mm,
for half a mile, as most strong men can't fast, you're not going to win. It's how can you be the most, for me, it's like the most well balanced athlete. And I love that because that's a really cool goal to have. Be aesthetically look good, but also be physically fit to be able to run a decent fast mile, lift decent amount of weight. Like that to me is having balance. But again, it goes back to what the ultimate goal is. Something I did want to touch on is since we're talking about you mentioned your daughter kind of that teenage year. So I started like my weight training around 14, 15. And for men and women or boys and girls at this age, the biggest thing is just going through puberty. So it's very similar to the menopause stage, the 50s and 60s,
mm,
because bone density. One thing that really needs to be focused is making sure that the bones and the muscles are allowed to grow effectively. And oftentimes, unfortunately, we see a high prevalence of dieting, specifically among young girls, but now as well as in young boys. And typically, when you do that, that actually stunts the growth of puberty. So you never really want to become in a calorie deficit during your teenage years. You can always take that too far, eat too much, and become in a caloric surplus, but definitely want to be eating minimum to meet the needs just to grow in general. So that's something that needs to be focused on from parents to teenagers. And if we have teenagers listening to this show, I'm very, very pro working out, weight training, eating right, eating healthy. But I see, especially nowadays, I see a lot of kids that are just jacked. Like, I mean, like lean, built young men that are in their that are 15, 16, and it looks great, but you're sacrificing long-term longevity in order to attain that at such a young age. And I know this because I'm speaking from experience. I competed in bodybuilding at 17, and the dieting took a toll on my body that I've kind of learned to I paid for it down the road. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of going through those
yeah,
two
because
ages.
she wrestled in high school for first 2 years, and those kids, my gosh,
Yeah.
they spent, and they can eat though. They eat a lot.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but
and
still
they don't
they
gain weight. That's because the
they cut
caloric.
weight though because of the wrestling
Yep.
matches. They have to maintain their weight class and whatnot. So
Yep.
I see that, right, and that yo-yoing, it's not healthy. It's really like I'm a little bit concerned, right?
Well, and again, it goes back to the overall goal, right? And the drastic cutting that you see in wrestling is a isolated instance, if you will, where
Mhm.
cutting is so important. Typically, in other any other sports, like for athletics, there's not a need for a drastic cut. Typically, on the off season, you might gain a little bit of weight, be it muscle, be it fat. But then, as you start preseason again, you're naturally going to cut that weight back because you're just more active. So wrestling is kind of its own niche. But that being said, yo-yo dieting in its whole as general is, again, for general aesthetic purposes, doesn't serve anything. At least in wrestling, you're doing it for an event and there's a purpose. Whereas in yo-yo dieting, there's just, let me just define yo-yo dieting and why it's called that is because, like a yo-yo, and we're dating ourselves here. I don't know if we should call this yo-yo dieting anymore
It must be a
because
new term or something,
most
or
people don't know what yo-yos are. But anyways, if you're familiar with what, man, I haven't played with one in so long. But if you're familiar with it, it starts up, you throw it down, it rolls down, it rolls back up. So what that means in the diet world is you start at a weight and then you cut down, you lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, and then you're there, and then you bounce right back up. Your weight, not right back up, but your weight slowly comes back, and then it goes down again. So
and
you're
potentially even more. You gain more weight on the up.
90% of people that diet end up gaining more weight than what they originally were. Yes.
Mm.
And that's because of behaviors. Because so that is the definition of what yo-yo dieting is typically a new diet will come out. People will people know that they want to lose weight. They have this goal in their mind of aesthetically how they want to look. They'll start the diet, they'll stick to it because they're seeing it in a short-term sense. They're seeing, okay, I only need to do this for 12 weeks, 16 weeks to get to my goal of 140, whatever. They get to that weight, be it for a wedding, be it for summer, but then what's the incentive to maintain that weight? They've gotten to that goal for the wedding, for whatever it was, but then what? There's no incentive to keep that weight off. Yeah, they would like to, but it's very, very hard because you can only diet, quote unquote, diet for so long. The concept of a diet is that you're eating below what your body needs. That's not a sustainable way of life. That's why people end up gaining the weight back. And when they go, they let themselves go because they've been dieting for so long. When they reintroduce those high calorie dense foods, they're just mindlessly eating. They end up eating more than they were initially. And that's why people end up gaining more weight.
I can't help but make that a correlation to like the Dave Ramsey way of financial
Ooh,
diet.
hot take. Tell me.
It's for reals. It's when you think about it, right? That way of like, okay, I have a goal of paying off, for example, right? My goal is to pay off all my consumer credit card debts, right? And then you go on this strict financial diet where
Rice and beans.
you right, you cut out all entertainment, you cut out going to the movies, you cut out. I mean, it's good discipline to build, but people take it to the extreme
Mm,
where um then they start to like really be so stingy with themselves, with their family, right? Because their goal is to get to, let's say, cut out all credit cards and don't use it at all, right? So that's
mm,
like an extreme level of that diet. And then once they reach that financial, right, you're financially free as far as debt is, then it's like, okay, now I can live again. And now, but that original habit of life is still in that person, right?
mm.
So they bounce back, right? Now let's go take that, Disney vacation, right? And how are you gonna pay for it? Then it kind of
That's
becomes that
crazy.
financial yo-yo diet, and it happens. I've I know people who's done the program, whatever, and then they get right back into debt.
That's crazy. I've never heard that before. Like I've never heard that concept. And you're right. It definitely links up. So That's crazy. Yo-yo dieting for your finances. That's cool. I know, and you're right. And I can put my money on it that the same people that will do that in the financial world are doing it in their nutrition and health world,
Mhm.
because the concepts are so similar that you don't even think about it. You just know that that's what's normal. You got to sacrifice. I got to sacrifice the foods that I love. I got to sacrifice the activities that I do because I have this ultimate goal. But it's not sustainable. It's just not a way of life. And I think when people set out on a journey, both their financial and their fitness journey, the clearer your goals can be, both on the short-term basis but also on the long-term basis, the easier it becomes to obtain, but also maintain those goals. And of course, there's nothing wrong with pivoting. There's nothing wrong with changing what your goals are, but it makes the journey more pleasurable. If you could, most people, if you tell them like, hey, you can lose 20 pounds in 3 months, but it's going to be hell, or you can lose 20 pounds in 9 months to a year, but you won't even notice that you're really losing the weight. If you tell them this before summer, they're going to be like, no, no, I need to lose that weight over 3 months
Mm,
because they need,
right.
that's their goal. So that is interesting. That's definitely a hot take.
Yeah. Just I was like when you were talking about it, I was like, oh my God. This reminds me of something else.
No, it's fair. So going back to kind of every a little bit of everything. So talking about different age brackets, right? We mentioned teens, we
Mm,
mentioned people in their 40s and 50s, kind of different nutrients that we want to focus on throughout the lifestyle, throughout the lifespan. We definitely want to focus on weight training. There's always going to be, everyone's going to benefit from weight training. I think tying into that middle bracket between 20s, 30s, where people are between the teens and between 40s and 50s, there's often times where you'll see people that come out of their teenage years and go into their 20s. You mentioned like your daughter's friends where they can eat, right? And then they take that into college,
mm,
and then they take that into their 20s. There comes a point, and if you're listening to this, more than likely you've experienced this. There comes a point where you can't eat the same that you once did as a college kid or even as a high school kid. And that becomes very challenging of, okay, well, how do I shift this? I'm so used to being able to eat all of these foods and barely have to exercise. That's what starts happening, is what's called skinny fat, where especially if you're not weight training. If you're not weight training at this point, the weight, people say the weight will eventually come up, like catch up to you. I've known people multiple times that are like this, who are skinny by nature, but they eat just a bunch of junk food. And people are always like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky, you never gain weight." Give it a couple of years.
mm,
Give it a couple of years. That weight will catch up, because those behaviors eventually, your body can only store and burn those so much as we get older. By the time you hit 30, your metabolism starts slowing down naturally. Year by year, your muscle mass starts declining. So if you don't have enough to preserve at the beginning, you're going to have more to lose. That's why it will catch up. So I think shifting those behaviors early on, nothing wrong with eating to grow the body as a young person. But when you start noticing that, okay, I'm not able to put down the food that I used to in terms of eating it as much, that's the time that you don't start dieting, you just start adjusting, because you haven't gained an excessive amount of weight in your 20s at that point, or even 30s. So you just want to shift it to, all right, let me see if I can eat a little bit healthier just to maintain my current weight because I'm comfortable. And of course, if you want to take it to that next level, that's the perfect age to start talking about aesthetics. Maybe you want to have a different body type, you want to look good in a bikini, you want to look good in a swimsuit. There's different ways to start adapting, but I think your 20s are about, in I'm talking about the general population here, 20s are about identifying, like, hey, what is the body type that I want? How knowing that I want to eat healthy, and I know how important weight training is. How do I implement that? But no matter what you do, naturally, those behaviors will lead to a healthier lifestyle.
yeah. I think just like in finances, in the financial world, our financial health, right? Like we were talking about, like, what is wealthy? What is that? Like you have to define that first, right? Like
Yep.
your body type. Like I'm going to be okay, not like looking like a Sports Illustrated model, right? I have
Yeah.
to accept that and be like, okay, I just need to find like a comfortable look that I feel confident in, comfortable in, and that I know I'm healthy. I'm maintaining in my health. And then once you had that set, then it's then you set the what type of diet and stuff that I'm gonna go with. I think that goes with the same in financial world, to be
Mhm.
honest, right? You have to decide like I'm okay not driving a Ferrari, or not having 50, Rolls Royce in my garage, right? I'm okay with driving, or having this type of house or this type of cars and having this type of vacations, having this, being able to afford these things for my family, set that and then kind of design backwards.
Yeah.
That's how I would approach it, right? Like now that I
Mhm.
had this conversation with you, now I'm going to go back and reset my
Mhm.
life, right? And say like, okay, I don't want to go on a diet, but
Yeah.
how am I going to change my lifestyle to
Huh.
fit more of like what, at my age I'm going through different things, and how am I going to stay healthy and, go from there. So same thing with
Yeah.
financials.
No, I like that. I think that we started this conversation talking about skin and talking about skin health. I think that's one piece of the aesthetic cosmetic component. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're able to realistically set a goal for how, like you mentioned, you don't have any desire, nor do you have any in your mind ability to become a Sports Illustrator model. So first and foremost, setting realistic goals, but still setting goals that are going to challenge you. Okay, aesthetically, like I want to have smoother skin. That's fine. What does that look like? Of course, we can define what smooth is, but how does that feel like to you? What do you imagine your skin? Do you have a reference point? Well, back when I was 22, or back when I was this age, or my friend, or whoever it is, as a reference point, that's what I would like to be skin wise. Okay, well, you're obviously not going to, you shouldn't start eating certain foods only for your skin health, right? You want to have goals from your skin. You want to have goals for how you internally feel. You want to have goals for how your body structure looks. And that's overall the big picture, right? And that's the same thing with finances. It's, you want to have a goal of, okay, ideally I would, in a perfect world, like if everything goes well, yeah, I don't need 50 Rolls Royces, but maybe I want to have one. That's like my peak.
Mm-hmm.
But having these goals amongst the way, okay, my next goal is I really want to buy a truck so that I can haul an RV to take my family around the country. Cool. That's a goal. If you're only a couple, levels below that, you can attain that. And what overall is that going to do for you in terms of happiness and overall health? Then you can, like you said, redesign backwards and start implementing things now that will help get you to that point of whenever that timeline is that you want to do. So this is great. I mean, you see the similarities of how they go. I absolutely love the yo-yo dieting, the Dave Ramsey financial dieting. I think that's such a good concept. I love it. So just kind of reiterating, as we mentioned, different age groups are going to have different focuses. We didn't necessarily touch on life after your 50s, but you will really, I've seen incredible people who don't even start their weight loss or their weight muscle gain journey until their 50s. And you see them running their first marathon when they're 74. You see them lifting. I mean, that to me is so cool because it just shows you that there's no time too late. No matter where you are, no matter the life you've lived, you can change at any point. And I think that that's awesome. So keep in mind, whatever age you're listening to this, that it's never too late to start. So we talked about a little bit about foods to help at different age groups, different ways to kind of implement it, but also different strategies and ways to focus and maybe rethink our thinking with how we emphasize the dieting culture, the aesthetic culture, and briefly touching on the finances. So great stuff. Pei, you want to wrap it up? Anything you want to add?
Gosh, we could have these type of conversation for hours and hours, but yeah, we
Yeah.
just want to touch on all these, highlights of
Yeah.
these things that are top of mind, and hopefully, it would inspire someone to either start thinking about it or start asking questions, or even if they're a little bit further along, start looking for the right, person to help them, right? Be
Mm,
it a coach or an advisor, whatever, right?
sure.
Go out there and do something.
Yeah.
That's
And,
what I
and
would.
and if you ever have questions, I mean, we always want our audience, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, more than happy to just have a conversation or pitch things a different way. I think it's good. We talked about community on previous episodes of having friendships, and
Yeah.
if you haven't by now, you'll start seeing the crossovers between fitness and finances, hence the name of the podcast. But that's where you're going to start seeing those crossovers. And once you change one and you set aside disciplines to improve one part, the other part is a very smooth transition to do, either simultaneously or at a later time if you want to focus one or the other. So once again, everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode. We look forward to having you on the next one. Bye, Pei.
All right. Bye.
Audio Jungle.